Some betrayals hit quietly. Others choose the loudest, cruelest moment possible. I had just married the love of my life. Flowers in the air, joy in the room, my future unfolding in front of me when my boss's son decided that my wedding day was the perfect time to end my career. Or so he thought. Because what he didn't realize was this. I wasn't just an employee. I was the system. And by the time he understood that truth, his entire empire was already collapsing. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to Tales by Lope, like this video, and turn on notifications, because stories like this don't just entertain, they remind you what real power looks like. Now let me tell you how a wedding day firing became the smartest mistake my enemy ever made. The text hit my phone like a slap. You're done here. Don't come back. I was standing in a satin wedding gown, the kind that hugged the waist and fell like water to the floor. My bouquet was still fresh in my hands, white roses, eucalyptus, tiny crystals tucked into the ribbon. The ceremony had ended minutes ago. I had just said I do. Now I was in the church vestibule, surrounded by floating floral arches and warm candlelight, hearing the muffled excitement of guests spilling into the reception area, laughing, talking, celebrating us, while my world tilted on the screen. The message was from Miles Carrington, my boss's son, the man who had turned the last 12 weeks of my life into a slow, deliberate punishment. He picked today. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Not even after the honeymoon. My wedding day. I stared at it, blinking hard, like my eyes could reject what they were seeing. Then I handed the phone to my husband, Jordan Brooks, because I didn't trust my voice not to break. Babe, I whispered, throat tight, look. Jordan read it once. Then again. And instead of exploding the way I expected, instead of going storming through the doors ready to embarrass somebody, his lips curved into a quiet, knowing smile. Not amused. Not happy. Just certain. He took my hands, both of them, steadying the tremble in my fingers like he was holding a frightened bird. Put it away, he said softly, and kissed my knuckles. Check the rest later. Today belongs to us. I frowned, confused and furious in the same breath. How can you be calm right now? I hissed. I just lost my job. Because it wasn't just a job. It was my position as Senior Project Coordinator at Northline Structural and Design, the most respected black-owned development firm in Baltimore, the kind of place people begged to intern at, the kind of company that got city contracts and magazine spreads and awards. I had built my entire adult identity around being dependable, precise, the person who made chaos look organized. And now a spoiled executive's son had fired me by text like I was disposable. But Jordan's eyes had that look again. That calm. That trust me. So I did the only thing I could do in that moment. I swallowed my pride, silenced my phone, slid it into my maid of honor's clutch, lifted my chin, and stepped outside with my husband into a storm of rose petals and applause. People cheered. Cameras flashed. Someone shouted, "You'll look good." And I smiled like a woman who had nothing to fear. 3 hours later, during our first dance, my maid of honor, Talia, practically ran across the floor toward me. Her eyes were huge. "Naomi," she mouthed, grabbing my wrist. "Your phone is going crazy." I glanced down. 143 missed calls. My heart dropped all over again. Calls from coworkers. Calls from numbers labeled office line, admin desk, site team lead. And then, 21 calls from one name. Mr. Carrington. Not Miles. His father. The company founder himself, Reginald Carrington. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just a petty firing. This was a company emergency wrapped in a personal attack. I slipped away from the dance floor, heels tapping fast down the hallway to the bridal suite, and listened to the first voicemail. Reginald's voice came through strained and sharp, nothing like the smooth, controlled tone he used in meetings. "Naomi, call me immediately. Miles had no authority to terminate you. None. We have a situation and we need you back in contact now." My chest tightened. I played the next message. "Naomi, the Harbor Point submission deadline is coming up, and nobody can access the workflow system. We're locked out. People can't pull updated plans. The contractors can't get the revised site schedule. Everything is frozen." Another message. More frantic. "We're at a standstill. The investors are calling every 10 minutes. The team is threatening to walk. By the time I reached the last voicemail, his voice didn't even sound like a boss anymore. It sounded like a man watching something expensive collapse in slow motion. Please, Naomi. We're bleeding time. And we can't move without you. I sat down on the edge of the love seat, wedding gown pooling around me like spilled milk. And something unfamiliar rose in my chest. Not fear. Not grief. Power. Because for the last 2 years, I had quietly become the spine of that company. I wasn't just good at my job. I had built the job. When I first joined Northline, they were still doing things halfway modern and halfway prehistoric. Email chains for approvals, handwritten change orders, mismatched file names like final_revise3. I fixed it. I designed an internal project control system from scratch, one that tracked every blueprint version, every material order, every client request, every permit status, every budget adjustment, every deadline. It wasn't just organized. It was protected. And I had tried to train the team to use it properly. But Miles, he canceled every training session I scheduled, called it a waste of billable time. Meanwhile, he kept taking credit for the efficiency the system created, walking into meetings like a prince wearing somebody else's crown. So now the company was choking on the very system he refused to learn. And I, freshly married, still in my gown, was the only person who could untangle the mess. Jordan stepped into the suite quietly, closing the door behind him. He looked at my face once and understood immediately that the celebration outside had turned into something else. "What's happening?" he asked. I handed him the phone. He listened to one message, then another. Then he sat beside me carefully, like he didn't want to wrinkle my dress or my mood. "I need to tell you something," he said. I looked at him, confused. "Now?" "Yes, because it's connected." Jordan wasn't just any husband. He worked for the city too, just not in the way people assumed. He was a building compliance reviewer in the municipal office. The man who looked over submissions and flagged what didn't line up. The calm, steady voice behind the counter who actually cared whether structures were safe, not just approved. That's how we met. I had been submitting documents for Northline's biggest contract yet, Harbor Point renewal, a waterfront redevelopment worth over $38 million. I remember him sliding my papers back once, not rudely, just firmly. "This section doesn't match your structural sheet," he said. Most reviewers wouldn't have noticed. Jordan did. And when I realized he wasn't trying to make my life harder, he was trying to prevent a future disaster, I found myself intrigued. Blueprint conversations became coffee. Coffee became dinners. Dinners became something soft and real in the middle of a workplace that was turning toxic. Jordan's voice lowered now. "The submissions Miles has been handling," he said. "He's been changing them after approval." My skin turned cold. Changing them how? Jordan's jaw tightened. Removing safety reinforcements. Substituting cheaper materials. Adjusting load calculations to fit budget cuts. Stuff that should never get past review, but he's been slipping it in. I stared at him. That wasn't just office politics. That wasn't just ego. That was dangerous. "Do you have proof?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Jordan nodded. "I've been documenting everything. I was going to report it next week, but the timing changed." And suddenly, I understood Jordan's smile earlier. The reason he didn't panic when I showed him that firing text. Because if Miles had officially removed me from the company, it did something unexpected. It separated me from legal responsibility for whatever he'd been doing. And at the same time, it left them helpless without me. A trap snapped shut, and the man who set it didn't even realize he'd stepped into his own. I swallowed hard. "So what do we do?" Jordan's eyes softened. "Tonight," he said. "Tonight we finish our wedding. We dance. We smile. We let them sweat." He brushed my forehead with a kiss. "Tomorrow, we fly to Barbados for our honeymoon like we planned." I blinked. "And then?" "And when we come back," he said, voice steady as stone, "we make sure the right people answer for what they've done." Outside, the music rose. Laughter floated through the walls. And I stood up, smoothing my gown, lifting my chin like a woman who had just been handed a secret weapon. I walked back into my reception with a smile bright enough to fool everybody. But deep down, I already knew. This wasn't the end of my career. This was the beginning of my revenge, done the clean way. By midnight, my phone looked like it had been possessed. 257 missed calls. The screen was a wall of names I recognized. Team leads, senior designers, the finance office, the main line at Northline, plus Reginald Carrington's number stacked so many times it felt like a threat. But I didn't answer. Not that night. Not while my husband's hand was warm around my waist and the air smelled like cake, perfume, and new beginnings. I danced like a woman who hadn't been publicly humiliated. Like a woman who wasn't staring down unemployment. Like a woman who hadn't just learned her former supervisor had been tampering with safety features on a multi-million-dollar development. And maybe that was the most powerful part. Because the truth was, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't moving out of fear. I was moving out of choice. When the reception ended and the last guest hugged us goodbye, Jordan and I climbed into the car our friends had decorated, just married written in chalk marker, ribbons dragging behind like we were running from something. We got home, kicked off our shoes, and stood in the quiet of our living room for a moment, still in our formal clothes, still wrapped in the shock of how fast life can shift. Jordan loosened his tie. "You okay?" he asked gently. I let out a shaky laugh that wasn't funny. "I don't know what I am." Then I looked down at my phone again, at the chaos, at all those calls, those desperate voicemails, those texts that went from stiff to pleading. And something settled in my chest. "I think I'm awake," I said. Jordan nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was worried about Northline, but because I was replaying the last 2 years like a movie I hadn't realized I was starring in. I hadn't always been this together. People saw the polished version of me, the woman who never missed a deadline, never forgot a detail, never walked into a meeting unprepared. They didn't see the years before. The years when my mother worked double shifts at a charter school, and my father, an old-school math teacher with strict standards and soft eyes, had a stroke when I was in my freshman year of college. Doctor's bills piled up like snowdrifts. Rent didn't pause for tragedy. So I didn't pause either. I took on a second job at a local print shop and sometimes stayed late there, inhaling ink and heat, then rushed back to campus to finish coursework while my classmates partied and lived like time was guaranteed. I became meticulous out of necessity. Because when you're one emergency away from losing everything, you learn how to hold life together with organization and sheer will. I graduated with honors in construction project management, plus certifications in systems administration and urban development compliance, a blend that made me rare. That blend was what caught Reginald Carrington's attention. Northline was respected, powerful, but outdated in the way it managed workflow. Reginald wanted modernization without losing control. He hired me, and I built what the company hadn't even known it needed. A proprietary system. Not just a folder structure. Not just a dashboard. A living pipeline that tracked every moving piece of a project, from the first sketch to the final inspection stamp. It reduced completion times by nearly a quarter. It made the firm faster, sharper, more profitable. Reginald called me the smartest hire I ever made. And I believed him. Until his son arrived like a storm with good hair and bad intentions. Miles Carrington wasn't incompetent in the obvious way. He wore confidence well. He spoke like he had answers. He had that polished, privileged ease, smooth voice, tailored suits, the kind of smile that made people want to trust him even when they shouldn't. But underneath, he didn't know how to build anything. He didn't know how to lead. And he hated that I did. Reginald had begun stepping back from daily operations, saying he wanted to enjoy life and focus on legacy projects. So he placed Miles as operations director over my division. Over me. Almost overnight, the energy at Northline changed. Meetings I used to attend stopped showing up on my calendar. Decisions I used to influence were made without me. Miles began presenting my system as if it were his creation, using my metrics, my charts, my language, like he'd swallowed my work and wore it like cologne. When I pushed back politely, he punished me subtly. He canceled training sessions I tried to schedule, calling them unnecessary overhead. He refused to approve budget for additional support staff. He asked me to simplify the system, not because it was too complex, but because complexity was proof of expertise, and he wanted to erase any evidence that I was essential. Sometimes he'd lean against my office door frame and say things like, "You're smart, Naomi. But remember, smart people still get replaced." It wasn't a joke. It was a warning. So when Jordan proposed and we decided to have a small wedding quickly, it wasn't just romance and practicality. It was instinct. Like my spirit already knew something was about to snap. Still, even I couldn't imagine Miles would choose my wedding day to push the knife in. But he did. And now he was learning what happens when you fire the person holding the blueprint to your whole operation. The next morning, Jordan and I boarded our flight to Barbados. And while the plane lifted into the sky, my old life, my office, my badge, my title, shrunk into something tiny and far below. The first day, I ignored my phone completely. The second day, curiosity got the better of me. I checked it while Jordan was ordering us breakfast near the beach. Voicemail count, 43. Text messages, too many to scroll. The newest voicemails weren't just from Reginald. They were from people who had never called me personally before. Senior executives, project leads, even a few clients. One message stood out. It was a private number, but the voice on it was unmistakable. Miles. His tone was forced calm, the way people sound when they're trying to pretend they're still in control. "Naomi," he said, "this situation has escalated unnecessarily. If you come in on Monday, we can discuss a smooth transition plan." I laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, because it was insulting. A transition plan. As if he hadn't fired me like a stray dog. As if my system was something you could just hand off like a folder. Jordan sat down across from me with 2 plates of food and took one look at my face. "What did he say?" he asked. "Miles is calling this an escalation," I said, voice low. Like I'm the one who set the match. Jordan's eyes hardened. "Let them experience what they created," he said simply. "You don't owe them comfort." That night, Reginald's voicemail changed tone. It wasn't just urgent anymore. It was bargaining. "Naomi," he said, voice rough. "Tell me what you want. I'll increase your salary by 200%. We can put it in writing. Just, please. We're bleeding." I listened to the message twice, then deleted it. The next day, he offered an executive role, then partial equity, then a future leadership guarantee. The offers climbed higher as the calls grew more frantic, but none of it moved me. Because Jordan was right. This wasn't about money. This was about the insult. The way they thought they could treat me like a tool instead of a person. Like I was only valuable when I was useful, and disposable the moment I was inconvenient. On our last night in Barbados, Jordan and I sat on the balcony of our hotel, watching the ocean swallow the sun in slow, golden waves. The air smelled like salt and hibiscus. Everything felt unreal in the softest way. Jordan leaned back in his chair. "There's something I want to suggest," he said. I glanced at him. "Oh, that tone means you've been thinking." He smiled. "I have." He nodded toward my phone, which had been buzzing off and on like a stubborn fly. "They want you back," he said. "But you don't want to go." "No," I said immediately. "I don't." Jordan's gaze stayed steady. "There's an opening in the city's development compliance consulting team," he said. "They need someone who understands submissions from both sides, someone who can build verification protocols and streamline accountability." I blinked slowly. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying," Jordan replied, "that you should stop letting other people profit off your brilliance. You should start your own consulting firm. And let the city be your first client." The idea hit me like a match to gasoline. A consulting firm. My own. A company built on systems, compliance, safety, and efficient project workflow. Not just for one firm. For the city. For multiple firms. A structure designed to catch the exact kind of corner-cutting Miles had been doing. By the time we landed back home 2 days later, I had typed an entire business plan on my tablet, pages of service offerings, pricing tiers, and a mission statement that made my throat tighten when I read it. Jordan watched me work with quiet pride. "You look alive," he said. "I am," I whispered. 3 days after we returned, I registered my business. North Star Compliance and Systems Consulting. And less than an hour after the registration went public, my phone rang. The caller ID made my mouth go dry. Reginald Carrington. I stayed at it, thumb hovering. Jordan stood behind me, hands on my shoulders, grounding me. This time, he said softly, you answer on your terms. I inhaled once, then picked up. Hello, Mr. Carrington. His relief was audible. Naomi, he breathed, like he'd been drowning and finally caught air. Thank God. We're in crisis. Harbor Point is collapsing. Clients are furious. Please, name your price. I held the phone away slightly and smiled. Slow, calm, controlled. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't about to beg for respect. I was about to invoice it. I didn't answer him right away. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make the shift in power unmistakable. I'm sorry to hear that, I said evenly, but I'm no longer available for employment. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. What do you mean? Reginald asked. Naomi, we can. I've started my own firm, I continued, calm and deliberate. North Star Compliance and Systems Consulting. The line went quiet. Then, fine. Then we'll hire your firm. Whatever your rate is, we'll pay it. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. My first client, I said, is the Baltimore Municipal Planning Authority. Another pause, longer this time. When Reginald spoke again, his voice had changed. He understood now. If I was consulting for the city, I wouldn't just be improving systems. I would be designing verification protocols. Protocols that would inevitably uncover unauthorized changes. Protocols that would trace responsibility. Protocols that would lead straight to his son. Naomi, he said carefully, Miles made a terrible mistake. He was threatened by your competence. By how much I trusted you. Let me fix this. Some things couldn't be fixed. Some bridges, I replied quietly, don't collapse. They burn. I ended the call and set the phone down with hands that didn't shake. Jordan was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, watching me closely. Do you feel bad? He asked. I considered the question honestly. No, I said. I feel clear. The following week, I began my contract with the city. The work was clean, methodical, purposeful. With insider knowledge of how firms like Northline operated, I immediately identified weaknesses in the existing approval pipeline, places where post-approval changes could slip through unnoticed. I redesigned everything. Digital fingerprinting for blueprint revisions, timestamped audit trails, mandatory secondary reviews for structural changes, locked approvals that required independent engineering verification. It wasn't flashy. It was effective. As part of the rollout, the city conducted a retroactive audit of recent high-value submissions, including Harbor Point, including every document Miles had touched. The findings were immediate and damning. Load-bearing specifications altered. Foundation requirements thinned. Safety redundancies quietly removed to shave costs. All without proper reapproval. The investigation moved fast. Harbor Point was permanently halted and reassigned to a competing firm. Miles wasn't just terminated. He was blacklisted. His professional license was suspended pending full review. Northline lost contracts worth tens of millions. Their reputation, built over decades, unraveled in weeks. Through industry channels, I heard that Reginald had suffered a mild heart episode from the stress. That news brought me no joy. Despite everything, he had once been a mentor, but his blind loyalty to his son had cost him dearly. My business, meanwhile, exploded. Within 6 months, I had contracts with 3 cities and more inquiries than I could personally manage. I hired staff, built teams, watched my name circulate in rooms I'd never been invited into before. Jordan received a promotion at the permit office for his ethical reporting. We bought our first home, a fixer-upper with solid bones and massive potential. It felt fitting. Then, exactly 1 year after my wedding, a thick cream envelope arrived at my office. Handwritten address. I knew who it was from before I opened it. Reginald Carrington. The letter was careful, humble. He acknowledged his failures, personal and professional. He explained that Miles had completed an intensive ethics rehabilitation program and now worked in a junior role under constant supervision. That Northline had new leadership, new protocols, new oversight, a different company. He wasn't asking me to return. He was asking me to consult, strictly as an external authority, to ensure they never violated the public trust again. I read the letter twice, then handed it to Jordan that evening. "What do you think?" I asked. Jordan didn't answer immediately. "What would your reason be for going?" he asked instead. "Closure, curiosity, proof they've changed." "All of it," I admitted. "And maybe to see if change is actually possible." Jordan nodded. "Then you already know your answer." I scheduled the meeting. When my assistant told me Reginald requested it be held at Northline's headquarters, I almost cancelled. Walking back into that building felt like stepping into a sky. But curiosity won. The day of the meeting, the receptionist, someone I didn't recognize, greeted me with visible respect. "Ms. Brooks," she said, "Mr. Carrington is waiting in the main conference room." As I walked the halls, I noticed everything had changed. New faces, new software displays, new energy. They had torn the place down and rebuilt it. The conference room door stood open. Reginald rose when I entered. Miles did not. He sat rigidly beside his father, eyes fixed on the table. Reginald looked older. Stress had carved lines into his face that hadn't been there before. "Thank you for coming," he said. I sat across from them. "Your letter surprised me," I said evenly. "It was necessary," Reginald replied. Then he glanced at his son. "Miles has something to say." Miles looked up slowly. The arrogance was gone. What remained was something raw and unfamiliar. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "What I did was vindictive, unethical, and dangerous." His words were rehearsed, but the shame on his face wasn't. "Apology noted," I said calmly. "Not accepted, not rejected, just acknowledged." Reginald slid a folder across the table. Inside was a full breakdown of Northline's rebuilt systems, thorough, compliant, and well-structured. And beneath it, a consulting contract offering a substantial fee. "We're not asking you to come back," Reginald said quickly, "only to evaluate our reforms." Miles stood abruptly and left the room. He returned moments later with a smaller envelope and placed it in front of me with shaking hands. Inside was a check, the exact amount of my wedding. Every dollar, down to the last floral invoice. "I wanted it precise," Reginald said quietly. Anger fled. Before I could speak, Miles placed a USB drive beside the check. "That's your system," he said. "All of it. Passwords, access points. It belongs to you." I stared at the drive. 2 years of work. 2 years of control. 2 years of restraint. And in that moment, something clicked. Revenge hadn't required my effort. Consequences had done the work for me. I stood. "I'll review your proposal," I said. "My fee will be triple your offer, paid up front. Full transparency. Full access." Reginald nodded immediately. "And one more thing," I added, locking eyes with Miles. "You will personally complete every training module I assign. Every one. You will become an expert in doing things the right way." Miles swallowed. "Yes." I turned to leave. "Oh, and the check," I said over my shoulder. "Unnecessary. Watching integrity get rebuilt will be payment enough." I walked out with my head high. But the story wasn't over. Not yet. Because that night, as Jordan and I discussed the meeting over dinner, my phone lit up with a breaking news alert. The firm that had taken over Harbor Point, under investigation for bribery. My stomach dropped. Jordan frowned. "That just opened today. State level." I stared at the screen. If they fell, the project would stall again. Jobs lost. Funding frozen. Communities left waiting. Again. And suddenly, Reginald's timing made sense. He wasn't reaching out for redemption. He was positioning. Jordan watched realization cross my face. "They're trying to get back in," he said. I nodded slowly. And for the first time since my wedding day, anger returned. Not sharp. Focused. "Then," I said quietly, "it's time I stopped reacting." I pushed my plate away. "I need to think." That night, sleep didn't come easily. Because by morning, I knew. The next move would define everything. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every word spoken in that conference room, every pause in Reginald's voice, every carefully controlled expression on Miles's face. Was his remorse real? Or was it survival? And Reginald, had he truly learned from the collapse of his empire, or was he simply trying to reposition himself for the next opportunity? By dawn, the answer settled into my bones. I didn't want revenge. I wanted control without compromise. At exactly 7 a.m., I called Reginald Carrington. He answered on the Feist ring. "I've reconsidered," I said before he could speak. "I'm not interested in consulting for Northline." Silence. Then a quiet, disappointed exhale. "I understand. I'm interested in a partnership," I continued. "A partnership?" His voice lifted with cautious hope. "Yes. My firm oversees all project management systems and regulatory compliance. Northline handles design and construction. Separate entities. Equal footing. Every submission goes through my protocols before it ever reaches the city." "That's highly unusual," Reginald said slowly. "So is firing someone on their wedding day," I replied calmly. Another pause. "What about Miles?" he asked. "Where does he fit?" "Miles works for you," I said. "But any project he touches goes through triple verification by my team. No exceptions." The silence this time was heavy. "I'll need board approval," Reginald said. "You have 24 hours," I replied. "After that, I present my own proposal directly to the city." When I ended the call, something unfamiliar washed over me. Not anger, not anxiety, ownership. For the first time, I wasn't responding to what had been done to me. I was setting terms. 23 hours later, Reginald called back. "The board has approved," he said, "with one condition. A minimum 3-year commitment." 2 years, I countered, with a performance-based extension we both define in writing. A pause. Agreed. Just like that, North Star Compliance and Systems Consulting landed its biggest partnership. 2 weeks later, when the competing firm was officially removed from the Harbor Point project due to federal investigation findings, our joint proposal was already finalized. Updated designs, enhanced safety redundancies, a compliance framework that couldn't be quietly bypassed. The city awarded us the contract. The press called it a new accountability model for urban development. Miles was reassigned as junior project coordinator, 5 levels below his former role. Every morning, my team sent him a training module. Every evening, he was tested. If he failed, he repeated it. He never complained. 3 months into the project, I arrived early at the construction site for a surprise inspection. The sun was barely up. Cranes stood still against the pale sky. And there, clipboard in hand, was Miles, already waking. "You don't need to verify this personally," I told him. "That's what site engineers are for." He straightened. "I know, but I need to understand every layer. That's the only way I'll learn." I studied him carefully. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something quieter. "Honest. Why did you do it?" I asked suddenly. "Why fire me that day?" He flinched, but didn't look away. "Because I knew you were right," he said. "About the system. About safety. About everything. And I couldn't stand that my father trusted you more than me." He swallowed. "I thought hurting you would make me feel powerful. Instead, I destroyed everything." The honesty surprised me. "You can't undo the past," I said finally. "But you can decide who you become next." Hope flickered in his eyes. "Then let's start with those concrete specifications," I added. "Show me what you found." For the next hour, I taught him, not rules, but reasoning. Why safeguards existed. Why shortcuts cost more in the long run. He listened, asked smart questions, learned. 6 months later, my former assistant, Raina, visited my office. "Reginald wants to promote Miles," she said bluntly. "Assistant project manager." I raised an eyebrow. "And he sent you to test my reaction." She smiled. "He did." I leaned back, thinking. "Tell him I'll support it, with one condition. Miles handles the upcoming community presentation alone." The presentation was tense. Residents remembered broken promises, stalled projects, empty assurances. I sat quietly in the back row. Miles didn't hide his nerves. He acknowledged past failures, explained the new safeguards, answered tough questions honestly, sometimes admitting, I don't know, but I'll find out. By the end, skepticism softened into cautious trust. The next day, I called Reginald. I support the promotion, I said. He earned it. Relief flooded his voice. Months later, Harbor Point rose steadily against the skyline. My firm expanded to 15 employees. Northline rebuilt its reputation under strict oversight. And one evening, as Jordan and I walked past the site at sunset, he squeezed my hand. Are you happy with how this turned out? I considered carefully. I'm satisfied, I said. Not because anyone suffered, but because real change happened. Jordan smiled. That's better than revenge. I leaned into him. Sometimes, I said softly, the greatest victory isn't destruction. It's reconstruction, on your own terms. By the time the first phase of Harbor Point renewal was completed, the city skyline looked different. Not just because new structures were rising, but because the way projects were managed had changed. What started as damage control became a blueprint for accountability. Other municipalities reached out. Other firms asked questions. North Star's partnership model, creative design paired with independent compliance, became the standard people referenced when they wanted to avoid scandal. And Miles Carrington, he became the most closely supervised project manager in the city. Every report double-checked. Every modification justified. Every decision documented. At first, people assumed he would resent it. Instead, he leaned into it. He studied harder than anyone on the team. Stayed later. Asked questions he used to brush off. The man who once cancelled training sessions now scheduled them himself, insisting every junior staffer understand not just how things were done, but why. I watched from a distance. Not rooting. Not hoping for failure. Simply observing. 6 months after his promotion, my phone rang. It was Rainer again. He wants your approval before he announces the next phase, she said. Miles insists. That told me everything I needed to know. 1 year and a week after my wedding day, I received a message that made me pause. Thank you for supporting the promotion. I won't waste it. Miles. I showed it to Jordan. He lifted an eyebrow. You going to reply? I thought about it. Then typed back. Make sure you don't. Some gifts can't be returned. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. Exactly 1 year after his gift to me, he had received one of his own. Accountability. That evening, Jordan and I walked past the construction site on our way to dinner. The air buzzed with activity, workers clocking out, lights flicking on, the smell of concrete in progress. Cranes rested against a deep blue sky. Do you ever wonder, Jordan asked, what would have happened if you'd chosen scorched earth? I smiled slightly. I might have won, I said, but I wouldn't have built anything that lasted. We stopped at the edge of the fence, watching the structure take shape. I didn't need to ruin them, I continued. I needed to secure myself. Jordan nodded. You did more than that. He was right. I didn't just protect my future. I reshaped an industry corner that had relied too long on unchecked trust and silent shortcuts. I didn't destroy Northline. I forced it to evolve. And in the process, I created something that belonged entirely to me. A month later, an industry journal ran a profile on North Star compliance and systems consulting. The headline read, From Wedding Day Termination to Industry Reform, How One Consultant Redefined Accountability. I didn't frame it, but I saved it. Because the real victory wasn't public praise. It was peace. Some people told me I was too kind. That I should have dismantled Reginald Carrington's company completely. That I should have crushed Miles when I had the chance. But those people misunderstand power. True power isn't about destruction. It's about choice. It's about having the ability to tear something down and choosing instead to build something better. Stronger. Cleaner. Safer. I didn't get even. I got ahead. And I did it without becoming the kind of person who would ever fire someone by text on the most important day of their life. As Jordan and I turned down our street that night, our renovated house warm and waiting, I realized something else. The text that once burned into my vision. It no longer held power. It had become a milestone. The moment my life stopped being something others controlled and became something I authored. And that, more than revenge, was triumph. If this story had you hooked, don't just listen, join the family. Tap like, subscribe to Tales by Laura, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story where betrayal meets justice. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? Some people think revenge has to be loud, destructive, cruel. But the truth is, the most powerful revenge is building a life so strong that the people who try to break you have no choice but to watch. I didn't just survive being fired on my wedding day. I rewrote the rules. I took back control. And I rose higher than they ever expected. Thank you for listening to Tales by Laura. Until the next story, remember this. When they underestimate you, let success do the talking.